What's up, everyone? Happy Wednesday. So yeah, streaming on a Wednesday today. So I need to kind of get my head around this. I normally stream on a Thursday, but yeah, moved it to a Wednesday for this week, ready for the final live stream of 2024. So hey to everyone in the chat who's joining us from, the Maxon or the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. So hey to Zusip and to Phil. Let me know if you can, see and hear me okay, because those of you who have been part of my live streams before know that it's just me here. So yeah, I'm monitoring, the production side of things and then also the actual stream itself. Hey to Brad and to Veronique as well. All right, brilliant. So really quickly, before we get started, if you do want to follow along and download the project files, you can do in the description to the video. So Jonas has just joined us and has thrown those in there. So thank you so much to him. Yeah, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be creating some squishy, fun, soft body waffles. And some of you might know that a couple of weeks ago, I ran a new fundamentals workshop, which gets you up and running in Cinema 4D and Redshift. That can be found on the Maxon Trainer Team YouTube channel. Basically, we created some fun waffles. We did some modeling, some lighting, some texturing, some animation as well. And I got a lot of comments on not just the live streams, but on Instagram as well, saying, Elly, these waffles should be squishy. They should be, like floppy and soft bodies and stuff like that. How do we do that? So I thought, for the final kind of live stream of this year, I would hijack that and show you how we can do some fun kind of squishy stuff. So this is just the animation that I'll play through just so you can get an idea of what we're going to create. So you can see here, these are fun and squishy and not rigid bodies, which they were in the original. And here's a little bit of a still frame of how this looks inside of Cinema 4D. And this is the idea of what we're going to create today. And we're going to start off by actually diving into soft bodies. So this is something that I haven't spent too much time teaching or training. So this should be a fun, slightly different session for everyone. All right, brilliant. So to start this off, we're actually going to begin just by diving into soft body simulation and what some of the settings, which are called constraints, actually do. Because it's not just a case of throwing a soft body tag on your object, hitting play and leaving it as it is. There are loads of different things that we can do. So we could create something to be really rigid, but still have that kind of floppy element. We can create things that are wobbly, like jelly. So understanding these constraints is going to allow us later on to understand soft bodies. And so then we're going to dive in and actually create that waffle animation as well. So I'm just going to create a floor here. As always, if you have any questions for me, I've got the chat on this screen so I can see you. So hey to Nick, Levsha and David, how's it going, everyone? So yeah, feel free to ask any of your questions on any of this and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, so like I said, we're going to dive into these constraints or these parameters. And the way that I like to show this is just by, really simple grabbing two primitive cubes. And if I just hit NB allows me to see the segments or the topology that makes up my objects, my geometry here. So we can see on my plane, we have a 10 by 10 grid. And currently on my cubes, I have nothing. Those of you that have been part of any of my simulation live streams will know my favorite phrase is topology counts, topology matters. And what I mean by that is the amount of points that you have on your object. So for example, the points that we have currently on here is very important. And that's due to the fact that the simulation system inside of Cinema 4D is a particle-based system. So what it does is it looks at all of those different points. It then looks at our constraints, for example, bendiness, stretchiness, softness in soft bodies. And it'll apply those based on where they are in conjunction to the next nearest point. So if we just let's set this to let's just do default for now, and then we'll have our varied cube. So left is going to be the default, right is going to be the varied, and I'm going to show you purely just by using these two cubes how the soft body parameters work, and then with that information we'll actually go in and build that waffle scene. So let's just do like varied. All right, brilliant. So as we know, we need a collider object. So with my plane, I can just right click and I can just type in the beginning of the word, and under my simulation tags, which is where we can find our pyro tags, our cloth, balloon, soft bodies, all can be found in here. And we can throw that collider tag on here. And my standard sort of rules here is I don't like any bounce and I like a lot of friction. So let's just add a soft body tag to these. So we're going to come in, we're going to create and add a soft body tag. And so the important thing here, so as I click this, you'll see we get these little lines. And actually, you know what I might do? First of all, I'm going to take that one off of there because I'm going to set up my segments first. So on my default, let's just set this to 5 by 5 by 5. And in my varied, let's make this a little bit more. So let's do 20 by 20 by 20. Okay, so we can see here we have one cube that is a lower resolution than the other cube. And then at this point, I'm going to add my soft body tag. And so we'll talk about what all of these things are in a minute. But first of all, I just want to show you the difference that topology can make on your simulated objects. And this isn't just the case for soft bodies. This is the case for cloth, soft bodies, ballooning, all of that kind of stuff. Anything that looks at the points and defines the constraints, which are kind of like our simulation settings for our object, and see how these look. So already, without changing anything, so everything, all our constraints within our tags are all the same, we're already seeing a difference in our object. And so bear this in mind, because obviously increasing your topology will change how your simulation looks, and it can also slow things down. So now let's dive into our actual constraints and see the differences that we can do inside of here. So now what I'll do is in my default, I'm actually going to match the resolution or the amount of subdivision. So if I set this to 20 by 20 by 20, we now have two of the same cube. Within the default, what I will need to do, this is a little top tip for you straight off the bat. Within the soft body tag inside of here, if you change or adjust the amount of topology on your object, you need to hit the refresh button. So straight off the bat, that is a very, very important tip, because right now we can kind of see how the poles look in comparison. So this is correct, this is incorrect. If I just hit that refresh, we now have the correct poles showing, and that's what these little lines are. So if we dive into now some of these settings, if I just pull this up, we can now see inside of our cloth tag. We have a few different options. We have some different constraints. And what we'll do, we'll take a look at a few of these. And again, we have our default cube, and then we have our varied cube. So everything that I change, I'll change on the varied one. What I can do, if you don't want to see your poles, you can actually just switch those off in the drawer. So it's going to allow us to see our poles or not see our poles. And we have a softness value. And the softness can be used to define what we'd call the deformability or the flexibility of the poles in the pull and push motion. So having smaller values of softness, so if I reduce this to a value of 1, will create less deformation. So we're now on this cube. So now we can see that we get slightly less deformation inside of here by changing that to a value of 1. And if I set it to a value of maybe 1,000, we can again see how much of a difference that softness value can make on our objects. So softness, again, is that sort of change in deformation and flexibility. And then what we have is we have then this max poles per point. And so what we can do, if we just come into our varied option here and we can switch these back on, if I come in close, we can see, or hopefully we can see, that we have 1 pole per point. So we can see, if we come really, really close in here, that for each point, we have one of those poles that's being created to help build our constraints and define our soft body, whether that's the softness or the rigidity or the stiffness of that. So we can increase the number of poles per point. And so now we can see we have a lot more of these poles within the middle area. And so what this means is less poles will mean our object or our soft body object will interact more like a normal garment or normal cloth. And with the more poles that exist, the more precise and natural that soft body effect is going to behave. But again, just like anything inside of Cinema 4D, the more we have of those things, for example, the more poles, the longer sometimes things can take to calculate. So it's about finding a balance. So now if we kind of take a look at how this looks, if we sort of come out of there, and let's take a look at this. So maybe what I will do is I'll set this to 1, just so we can see a big difference inside of these. So now, especially when it hits the floor, we can see the change in softness value. So the one on the right has a higher softness value, the one on the left has a lower. So we can see how we're allowing more of that flexibility and deformation. And then where we have more of those poles, again, we're getting a more accurate or precise soft body simulation. So back inside of here, if I actually reset these back to the original, so we now have these both working in the same way. So we have the same set of settings now. Just like other types of simulation, things like bendiness and stretchiness and those constraints that also have a part to play can also affect how the simulation will look or how your soft body will be affected. So as we know, the bendiness is very useful. So it looks at each point next to another point, so the neighboring points, and it will allow more or less bend or rigidity or softness. And then stretchiness is how much every other point is going to be able to stretch in distance from that next point. So again, we'll leave the default as it is. And then on my varied, if I begin to add some bendiness values, we can now see we're getting this more cloth-like feel on the outside, but the interior is still acting like a soft body. We can then incorporate some stretchiness. So maybe we can go even higher with these values. And so now we're starting to see how this can affect the look of our simulation. And something that you can do, so this is where it comes down to just playing and understanding what's going on in our scene. If we have no bendiness, but we have stretchiness, we create a more jelly-like simulation. So we can see here we're getting more of this wobble, but we're still maintaining that structural shape. Okay, so let's then combine it with some of our soft body settings. So if I want to, inside of here, maybe increase my softness, now we can see that we're getting more deformation occur. So we're getting more of that sort of flexibility. And then we could even see what happens as we increase our max pulse. It then again increases the accuracy. So with these different settings and with the understanding of them, we can create different types of behavior and different types of movement. So again, if I just sort of switch this back on, let me just get a little bit closer so we can dive into a bit more. And let's maybe do 3. So we've got 3 poles per point now. And what we can look at is this spread value. And so at the moment, what happens is if we have 1 pole per point, so now for every point we have on my geometry or my mesh, we have 1 pole. And what happens is it fires out to the directly opposite point based on the normal direction. So the normal direction of the point, the pole then follows and it connects to the opposite point. What the spread will allow me to do is it will allow me to open up that angle of the normal and it will allow me to redirect those poles. And so then we're able to connect to different points in varying angles, again, helping to maintain that cage and that structure. So if we keep an eye on these, and as I start to increase my spread, we can see if we go up to a value of 180, and then we begin to increase my points, we create more of those poles in a lot more of those areas, especially those tighter, smaller areas. So again, if I pull this back down, we're just going in the direction of the normal. As we go up, we can see that we're getting more and more and more occurring in there. Okay, so that side of things, slightly more theory, slightly less exciting, but allows us to really see visibly what those different constraints are doing. So the softness, the poles, the spread, and then of course the bendiness and the stretchiness. So I had a quick question from David. Can you have a deformation or soft body only parts of the object, for example, only on the top or the bottom? Yes, absolutely you can. So just like many other things inside of simulation, we have the ability to apply vertex maps. And so vertex maps will allow us to have an area where a certain amount of softness can occur. And then mix animation, what it could do is it allows us, so let's actually do this. Let's do this, why not? So let's do this. Let's take my cube again. Let me just pull that off. And let's go into here and let's do 10 by 10 by 10. And then let's add a vertex map. And in my vertex map, let's just do a gradient, something like this, right? So we have our vertex map and this is our change in weight. And what this means is we're allowed to define areas. So let's say if we're talking about simulation, we can have the red area not simulated and the yellow area simulated. So what we could do is we can come into my cube and we could add a soft body tag inside of here. And then with pins, I can apply my vertex map. And so now what happens is the bottom is actually a soft body. So we can't really see it at the moment. So let me, what can I do to make this a bit more visible? Let's maybe increase the number of points. And again, don't forget to refresh that. Maybe add some more points inside of here. And so maybe I'll actually just bring in a plane. And what I'll do, I'll squish it up a little bit, right? Just so you can see that this is now working. And let's add some more frames. So we'll kick this off. So now you can see that bottom part where that vertex weight is, we're able to make soft body, cloth, balloon, anything you want. And that top part is going to be rigid just by applying that vertex map inside of my mix animation. So hope that helps answer that question for you. Okay, so yeah, theory parts aside, any questions on any of that, then please do let me know. But now what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can actually create that waffle animation or simulation. So what do we want to do? Let me just go into this scene here. Cool, right? So this is just the basic parts of this scene, which was, you know, a backdrop, a little plate from the asset browser, and then one of the waffles. So really quickly, yeah, so inside the asset browser, if you ever want to grab some models, materials, anything, you can actually just find these in here. Anything that has this little lovely Redshift icon is textured and optimized for Redshift. So that's all I did. I just, you know, I cheated and I grabbed the plate from the asset browser. So I didn't have to make my own. All right, fantastic. So what we'll do, I might actually just switch off my backdrop for now because we don't really need that. And this is the start of my scene. Also, this is the whole project file that you have available, by the way. This one here that's lit, textured, all that kind of fun stuff. But we're going to start from scratch. So I've got my waffle here and I've got my dinner plate. So I've got my collider tag on the plate because this is going to be the object that is going to be like my floor and it's going to interact with that waffle. And I've got my backdrop hidden for now. Right, so if I just pull this waffle up here, we can see it's not the highest resolution, but it's also not the lowest resolution. So this is kind of, I took the one from the fundamentals course and I remeshed it. So, you know, I remeshed it, which is a really handy tool to reduce topology and mesh density. I made it lower resolution, but then the trouble is I can't go any lower than this because, I mean, I'm already starting to lose the, you know, the nice looking waffle here. Of course, what I can do, I can subdivide it later on if I want to. But this is as low as I could go. But the trouble is, this is still, when it comes to soft bodies especially, this is still quite hard to control. So I'll show you just so we can talk about it a little bit. But let me just add the soft body tag. I'll throw that on there. So we can see we've got a soft body tag. We have this on here, and we can switch those off. I can press play. Probably all agree, doesn't exactly look like, you know, that squishy waffle that we sort of hoped for. And so what we can do, knowing sort of the information that we know, we could say, oh, okay, but what if we increase the number of points, and what if we perhaps increase that spread so we now have more of them over the smaller areas, right? And as Tote said, I wouldn't eat it. I definitely wouldn't eat it either. And so if by increasing these and then perhaps by reducing that softness value, so we don't want too much deformation, we just want a little bit of, I don't know, wobbliness, if that's a real word. And now we can play, and it kind of like it's kind of trying to keep its shape, but we've got, you know, a little bit, we could go a little bit higher again, but as we know now, as we increase too many poles, it can reduce performance. What else can we do? We could come into our project settings. So Command or Control D will open up your project settings. And then in our simulation, what we can do is we can play around with substeps and iterations. And what this does is it improves the accuracy and precision of your constraints. So it does increase stiffness, but it increases accuracy and also can lower performance. So maybe we could say, all right, well, let's increase the substeps and let's increase our iterations. And now let's see, like it looks, obviously, it looks a bit better, right? But the performance is slower. If I added a lot of these and cloned them, it isn't as well performing. And so this has worked okay. So as we can see by sort of adjusting a few of these settings in here, and these are all left to default for now. We don't have any bendiness, we don't have any stretchiness, because we want it to act more like a soft body object, less like a garment. And then in our project settings, we can bring back some of that rigidity and accuracy with my substeps. So we could maybe do this, and let's sort of duplicate that and sort of play around with this a little bit just and see what this looks like. So already, I don't know how clear it is to see on the stream, but I'm getting lower frames per second. So my playback and my performance is taking a hit. And I've only got 2 of them. Right, I've only got 2 of them. So I'm going to show you a fun little hack trick that you can do that's still soft bodies, but it allows us to create and manage a lower resolution version of our object, because we can then create more even quads and topology, which we know is the thing that's going to help us when it comes to simulation. And then we can simulate that low res version, and then we can take that and we can throw it onto this high res version. So let's do this. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to zero out the waffle, and I'm going to create a cylinder. So inside of here, let's just take that. And what we can do is we can press S, will take us to exactly where that is. So you know what, maybe actually I can just switch that off as well for now. And then press S on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a low resolution cage. And so with the cylinder, I can kind of match this. So let's just take a little look. And I'm just going to eyeball this. And we want it to be relatively accurate, right? So let's just move this around and something a bit like this. And then within my cylinder, I have this caps option. So I can create some rounding this way. And perfect, cool. So what we have, if I do MB, we've created this low resolution sort of cylinder, low resolution version of this waffle, which we can then increase some of these segments in here. And then what we can do is we can actually then have far easier control of my simulation on this cylinder. And so as we just saw, as I tried to sort of turn the high res version into a simulation, it has creates some problems. We have some underperformance. I'm on an M3 Max MacBook Pro, so we don't have the best performance. I was having to probably, reduce the resolution of the waffle too much. And so then it doesn't look nice enough. And so what this is going to allow me to do is it allows me to have so much more control by simulating the low res version. And I'm going to link that to the high res version. So one thing that I do want to do is if I just hide this, when we talk about topology and we talk about even topology, this currently is not even topology. So we have these tiny little triangles that go into this point, and then we have some larger squares here and these little squares here. So as we simulate this, and as we know, the constraints are based on our points and our topology, we will get varying behavior on this object based on the areas that are high resolution and low resolution. So we want it to be as even as possible. My favorite thing in the world is the remesh tool, because this is going to allow me to remesh this. It's going to change my topology, and it's going to try and give me as even quads as it possibly can. Perfect for simulation. So let's just throw my cylinder in my remesh, and then we can maybe do symmetry because it's a symmetrical object. And now we have a better looking topology. And we can just, current state to object this, and this can be our waffle low. And so this is going to become my waffle high. High. There we go. And I mean, we can just hide this if we want to, switch those off. Anything that you want to do, just you can delete them, hide them. I tend to keep originals just to be sure. And so now we have the high resolution and the low resolution. Actually, let's keep that hidden. And let's bring back that plate. So now let's take this version and just make a really simple MoGraph setup. So with the cloner, so just inside of here, we can grab ourselves a cloner. Works in a great way to create clones. So if I drop the low resolution in there and then set this to linear, and then maybe make them 5 centimeters apart. There we go. And let's do, what should we do, 4 of them? Let's do 4. And then maybe pull this up a little bit. All right, brilliant. So maybe we can make them a little bit further apart. So with the linear mode and the count enabled, we can actually control the position on the Y. And so this is the distance between each clone. So each waffle or cylinder is 6 centimeters apart, just like this. Because we're going to have them fall down and stack on top of one another and act all, wobbly and squishy. Let me just, for the sake of this, hit save. And then let's give me some room back. Add a little bit of random variation. So if my cloner selected, have a little bit of, randomness here. A little bit of position, rotation here. A little bit like that. And if we really want to, we could do maybe like a minus 0.1 on the scale. Just a little bit of variation. All right, brilliant. So now what we need to do is we need to set up our simulation on this low resolution. So on my cloner low, let's apply a soft body tag. Where have we gone? This one. Let's apply this soft body tag, and then let's take a look at, the settings that we've really just taken a look at. So straight off the bat, let's see how this looks. Okay, so I mean, we have the squishiness, but maybe they're a little bit too squishy now. We're kind of smushing them in on top of one another here. So maybe what we need to do is we need to reduce the amount of deformation and flexibility that we have. And so as we know, that softness constraint is how we do that. So let's maybe set this to 10. And so, okay, we're keeping it a little bit, but it's still kind of crushing in on itself. And this could be due to the maximum poles that we have. So at the moment, if we see, we don't have, a lot of poles within that sort of volume of my object. So maybe we could go something like 25. And then again, remember that spread is how much from that normal direction the poles are then going to be allowed to spread out and therefore connect to the other points in front of it or on the other side of the internal surface of my object. So let's set those to 90. And now let's take a little look. Okay. So we're getting a bit closer now. And then what we can do is we can continue to play around. Again, remember your sub-steps and your iterations are going to help with that stiffness and that rigidity. Things like damping can reduce the kinetic energy. So if I increase this damping value, we could maybe have them hold on a little bit more. And then don't be afraid to then come into this surface tab and take a look at these settings as well. So for me, bendiness and stretchiness, in this case, I don't find has any additional benefits, because this will then make the exterior or your object begin to react more like cloth. So, I mean, I can show you, we can sort of like add some values inside of here and we can sort of see how this looks. So yeah, it just begins to cause some issues and some errors, which I would rather resolve with my simulation or project settings and my soft body tag. And then let's maybe up that friction as well. So as our objects collide with one another, they won't be like slipping. And then the thickness distance. And so think of this as your collision barrier, your collision distance for your points. So as we know, the simulation system, it applies a particle to each point, and that's what we base our constraints on. And the thickness is the collision thickness. So if we're working with small scenes and small objects, which in this case we are, this waffle itself is actually, or this cylinder itself is 10 by 2 by 10. And so what we need to ensure is we also then have a collision thickness that is low enough. So we don't have that, you know, that gap between my waffles. And then also something we can do is in my scene, the constraints are also based, or their accuracy and precision is based on this scene scale. So this is a default scene scale, is 100 centimeters, Cinema 4D's default scaling. But because my objects are smaller, I'm actually just going to reduce that scene scale because of these. And so now we can see we're getting a much better looking and more accurate looking simulation. And you can see how fast this is. So considering this is then a cloned simulation, it's happening very quickly. And so that is because we're using a low resolution cylinder. So we've created that low resolution object. And now it's so much easier for me inside of my settings to be able to make it more or less soft, have more or less poles, have more or less rigidity, because I'm using a lower resolution cage. So we saw when I tried to do it on a high resolution waffle, how much harder it was to control. Imagine that even high resolution. So, you know, this waffle isn't actually that high resolution, but if it was, it would cause some problems. All right, cool. So we have our low resolution sim set up. So now what we can do, let's just make this, let's just match this really. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm actually just going to zero out this. So I've got this high resolution version. And so actually, you know what? What am I doing? What am I doing? Let's just copy the cloner that's already got everything on it, set this to high, delete the tag. So we don't want this to be simulated, because we're going to take the low resolution sim and we're going to apply it to it. So it doesn't actually need to be physically simulated. We can drop that in there. We can get rid of that one. So we have the low resolution and the high resolution now. So basically that's all we've done. And now it has the same random effector, it has the same attributes. Everything is in roughly the same kind of place. And so as we press play, we can see we have that sim. And now what we want to do, we want to connect them together. We want to link the high res with the low res, or the low res with the high res. So the way that we can do that is, first of all, we throw everything into a connect. And this is going to connect and have this seen as a single kind of object. So the way that we do that is inside this little menu here, we can grab another one of our generators, which will be the connect, and let's just duplicate it. And we'll drop the high in one and the low in one. And then the final step is the way that we actually link these two things together. So the way that we link this low resolution simulation that we've already got going on to the high resolution one is by, inside of our deformers, we take what's called a mesh deformer. So we can take that mesh deformer, and then what we can do is the mesh deformer, we're going to be deforming the high resolution sim, right? So the high resolution one is the one that we want to deform. So I can make it a child of the connect. And then, so if I just do this connect, let's set this to high, just so we stay organized, which I promise you, I am not normally this organized, but it does help. And so I try and do it as much as I can on a live stream. And inside of my mesh deformer, we need a cage. And so the cage is the low sim that we just set up. So we can drop the connect inside of here, drop down the advanced tab, because this is key. So the different modes here, what we need is we need the surface mode. And this means any of the points outside of the cage, we'll look at the closest points within the cage, and we'll still allow the deformation or the squashing or stretching to occur. So if I left it on ignore, all of these areas that are actually slightly outside of my cage won't be deformed, and then you'll see this weird kind of like mess happen. So if you see a weird mess, chances are that's probably what you've done, is you've left this on ignore, and we need to set it to surface. And then final step, don't forget, don't add your emojis. That was not the final step. Inside the mesh, hit that initialize button. So this has done a couple of things. So first of all, our outside cages have actually turned into slightly transparent wireframes. And so we can see we have a few different compositing and display tags. And so all this is done, this is just a nice user-friendly thing. Set this to lines and wireframes so it doesn't interfere with our sim. And now what should happen, it's the moment of truth, as I press play, the high resolution waffles should actually match and link up with this, she says. Let's actually just hide these for now. Okay, cool. Right. So this is an issue that has occurred. So what this means is, it means the cage is perhaps a little bit too small. So let's just increase that size slightly. So let's, you know what I might do? Let's switch that off just so we don't interfere with anything. And let's just bring up that cage slightly. And then just redo that option. So let's throw that again onto here. So that's going to be on our connect. And then we drop our connect in here, surface and initialize. And now we press play. Okay, so I'm still getting some strange issues. Let's try surface area and initialize that now. So I'm seeing a weird little sort of like bug, and I think it's just a bug at the moment. So I did come across this when I was playing with damping, but what should be happening, and is what happened in the original, is we shouldn't have these outside areas. So maybe again, we could perhaps switch that off, and let's try again, just sort of increasing this one more time and then initializing that and play around with that. Okay. Okay, so I think it's just a viewport bug that I can see at the moment because the rest of it is actually working fine. And so I think I'm just coming across this weird little bug, which of course doesn't happen when you're off stream, but sometimes these things can happen. But we're getting that now matching that in the same way that it should be. And so if I just sort of cut to this one here, do you know, actually, no, let's stay on this one and let's just hide this. And so let's go NA and let's do this. All right, so we can see now what it's done is it's taken, I'm just going to ignore that bug, and it's taken that low resolution simulation and we're now actually applying it to this high resolution option. And now we're able to simulate this high res version far easier, far more accurately, and with a higher performance. And then what we're able to do is, you know, we could even up-res this now. And so we can play around with this. And what's great about this is we can continue to go back into my simulation tag, my simulation settings, and then we can actually reapply new settings. We can change how this looks. If we find that the simulation is, you know, too soft or not soft enough, we can play around with that. So we could play around with this and then always make sure when you go back in, we reinitialize. Hey, we fixed it. And so we reinitialized. And so at the moment, we obviously have too much of a gap. And that's probably where I increased this cage to be a little bit too high. So what we need to do is just come in and we just scale this cage down. And again, reinitialize. So always make sure every time you make any of these changes, you go back into your mesh and you reinitialize all of that. Cool. So if I just take a look on this final version, so the only difference here really is the number. So if I just show you this final version. So this is the one that's in the project files. So link in the description to this video. You can grab this actual scene file here. And so we can see that we have the high resolution sim. So everything that we just set up, that high resolution waffle, that cloner here with 15 clones. So you can push it and we can have like a high number. So I only did 4 just for the purposes of a live stream. I then subdivided these. So if I just switch that off, you can see it's that original slightly lower resolution mesh. Subdivide those, or again, you can subdivide using the Redshift object tag. So I'll show you that in just a sec. And then we have that low resolution version with the soft body simulation. And so the settings that I ended up with for this was a softness of 10 and then 30 poles per point and then a 90-degree spread and then nothing on here apart from a very low thickness value. And this is to make sure we don't have that gap that we can see in the other scene. And then again, that high friction value and my scene settings. What did I have? Here we go. So increase substeps, increase smoothing iteration so we don't get that extra jittering that can occur at the end of a simulation, and then some damping, and then of course increasing those collision passes if we have errors. So really quickly, just to kind of show you something inside of here, let's get rid of my subdivision surface. So the reason that this method works so well is, again, because we have so much control using that low resolution version. And so this is the biggest thing that I tend to talk about when it comes to simulation is, of course, your topology and the amount of, you know, subdivisions you have on your mesh. Simulation requires a lower resolution mesh in a lot of cases. So in this case especially, we saw how challenging it can be to have a higher resolution set of geometry. But something that you can do to counteract this, so as we can see here, we have this relatively low mesh inside of Redshift. So I just kick this off and literally get really close in here. So we can see that this doesn't look very nice. And you know what I might even do is, I can't help myself. I have to throw in a dome light and a HDR. I have to. So let me just apply these and take a look at this. And let's just pull this round just so we can see this low resolution geometry. So hopefully this is visible for yourselves to see. We have these jagged edges. And so you're probably thinking, oh, Elly, I want to be doing soft body simulation, but I can't afford to reduce the mesh too much. Well, one, this mesh deformer method works really well, as does reducing the density with that remesh generator here that we just looked at. And then you can combine it with the redshift object tag. So if I just throw that on here, it might even need to be on my high waffle. And then we can go to override, and then we can enable tessellation. And so what this is, if I just kick that off, maybe does it need to be on the connect then? Yeah, it does. All right, cool. So because I've connected it as a single object, it has to be on the connect. In normal cases, you can just put it on the object. So what we're doing is we're now subdividing at render time my geometry. And so now it looks as smooth as if I was using that subdivision surface, but I'm now doing it at render time. I'm not doing it in the viewport. So I can continue to simulate my low resolution version and up-res at render time. Cool. So let me just answer a few questions. So we've had a question from Maxime. Can you explain UVs on C4D, or do you have a tutorial that explains it? Absolutely, yes. So we did a series on this. So on the Maxon Training team, we have done loads of different series across, various different topics with various different trainers and guest presenters. So I'm heading over to it here. So so you guys can see too. Let's throw this on here. So inside the Maxon Training team, let's just make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. So, hey, this is us right now, streaming live. We have, if I go to live, I search UV workflows. Here we go. We did an entire series. So actually, let me get rid of that. So we did a 4-part series on UV workflows in both Cinema 4D and inside of ZBrush. So if you do want to dive into that, let me just, what I will do? I'm going to share this in the chat. So this is just part 1, but it's a 4-part series. So I'm going to ping that in the chat. So definitely head over. So anything, even if you're unsure if we've done it before, head over to the live or the playlists and then hit that little search button. And then we try our best to tag things with the topic. For example, UVing. So search UV. If you want to learn about MoGraph, type in MoGraph. So let's see, do we have some MoGraph stuff inside of here? We do, or motion graphics, product visuals, any of that. If you're unsure if we've done an actual session on it, head over to our YouTube channel and then just hit search. And if we haven't, training@maxon.net. Send us your ideas, especially if it's something we haven't covered before, because we're already in plans for 2025. We do Create with Maxon series where we have a different topic every single month with guest presenters. You can also head over to our Maxon events page, and this is where you can see all the stuff that we have going on. So all the streams that we have upcoming, all that kind of stuff, just head over to the events page and then you can see that. Or feel free to follow me on Instagram. I'm at @itwaselly. Any tutorial ideas, quick tips, anything like that, just, DMs are always open. So feel free to ping me a message. So I'm just checking out, if there's any other questions, then do let me know. But really that was kind of the gist of it. A very, very kind of simple-ish technique that dives into actually looking at soft bodies and what they do. And so again, this is something I haven't talked about too much, haven't dove too much into these settings, but we can do so many different things just by playing around with, softness, pose, spread, bendiness and stretchiness. You could create something that was a really kind of like floppy, fluid jellyfish style, or a more of like a slightly more stiff food like waffles. And so just to do a quick reminder of like the animation. So this is kind of how it looked. And I deliberately left this a little bit, you know, not unrealistic, but a little bit more cartoony, because I like that style and I like that effect. And so using these exact techniques is exactly how we created this. And again, this is the project file that you'll have access to, is this one here. And it's lit and textured. I think I might have re-textured this one. Yeah, I've been playing around with the textures, but you have a very, very similar version to this one. So yeah, feel free to head over into that. And yeah, so some of you might know this is my last live stream of 2024, and it's been a pleasure. It's always so fun doing these live streams with you all, and like on behalf of Maxon and with the whole Maxon team. To everyone in the chat, I hope you have, you know, whatever you're doing over the holidays, whether you are like continuing to work hard, whether you're having a nice chill break, whether you celebrate Christmas or celebrate any kind of celebration or holidays, get some chill time, relax. If you're like me and you like food, I will be eating a lot. I hope you guys do too. And I look forward to, you know, many more live streams and many more quick tips and events in 2025. Don't forget, honestly, DMs are always open. If you have any questions on anything, if you want to learn more, if you just want to, I don't know, harass me with questions and, you know, ideas for tutorials and live streams, I promise I may not reply straight away, but I do look at them, I do read them, and I do have a list of stuff that I'm planning for 2025 based on all your suggestions. So yeah, it was Elly, that's Elly with a Y. And yeah, I guess I will wrap this up and say happy holidays, everyone, and I will see you in 2025.